Let me share with you some experiences which Mozambique has adopted. First, we have a National Institute for the Disaster Management. This institute normally, what its program is, to educate the people, to inform the people while we are facing that we are waiting or are facing cyclone because we are neighbor to Madagascar and the Indian Ocean is along our coast, which is 2,700 kilometers. And mainly of problems with about cyclone, floods, and dries, it starts along that coast. But mainly now, what the strategy is to educate the people. While we face that the cyclone or the flood is coming, normally we use the local radios to communicate the people for immediate evacuated that area. Secondly, we use the system of communication with our neighbor countries. You know that Mozambique, we have about 6 or 7 neighbor countries. I can mention Zimbabwe, Malawi, South Africa, and Zambia. While cyclone or floods occur in Mozambique, this cyclone, these floods affect immediately Malawi, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. But then we need immediate communication with our neighbor countries. And I can mention that the last cyclone, Freddy, when I came in my country, that left so many people had died, and so many destructions, like schools, hospitals, bridges, etc., etc. But then the warning system, it's very, very important to avoid the loss of lives, the loss of schools, bridges, etc., etc. That's what I can share from now. Thank you, moderator.
Thank you very much indeed. And to the Ambassador for Climate and Energy Policy in Estonia, and I should add you're in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Catherine, give us a sense of how you support international efforts to enhance EWS and EWE. And of course, I will mention here that your role, or Estonia's role as custodian of the data for the Environment Alliance. So, you know, I guess within the context of that as well, and that context is quite important. Go ahead.
Now it's working. Well, thank you, and good afternoon to everybody. And first of all, I'd like to congratulate the Science Policy Business Forum for organizing a great event again and for inviting me. So I'm glad to be here as a part of the forum's activities. Yes, I am from the Estonian Foreign Ministry, the Climate Ambassador. And people usually maybe don't think that the Foreign Ministry has anything to do with the environmental policies, but I've said it also earlier that my last posting was in Geneva as the ambassador, permanent representative to UN, and there in Geneva I learned that these climate issues, environmental issues, they are really horizontal and impacting our lives, daily lives, and also they were on the table in all of the work streams in Geneva. So the mere fact that I'm the climate ambassador in the foreign policy is a proof that there is a clear role for climate policy, or for the role for foreign policy also in the climate and environmental topics. I'm the second climate ambassador in the Estonian Foreign Ministry already. In these videos we see here during the breaks, I've seen also my predecessor sitting in the UNEA panel. Yeah, and Alexander just said the very wise word in his introductory words that early warning is a tool to save lives. It indeed is. But as we know, then early warning systems, they rely on extensive monitoring, network reliable data, and the prompt data analysis to be able to accurately forecast the future. And we know that in the countries with a functioning and effective early warning system, where the forecast is there, the death rates are let's say 8 times lower than in the countries where they don't have the effective early warning system. We in Estonia, we do have the early warning system. And we have also recognized the importance of data many times or a long time ago already, and the power of data in influencing the decision making. Long time ago, when we regained our independence at the beginning of 90s, soon after that we chose our digital path. And since 150 years already, we have consistently collected also the climate and environment data. So when you ask me what is the aim of the foreign policy in that, then the foreign policy's aim, one of the aims is also to keep data high on political agenda in our policies. Also when talking about climate and environmental issues. So we, from the Estonian foreign system, we try to provide as much as possible political support also to the work related to data governance. We are quite active, for example, in the International Telecommunication Union, in IGF, in different international organizations. When we come to the talks about, specialized agencies and organizations about migration, about humanitarian issues, one of the subjects which is interesting these organizations most is the digitalization, and to learn about our experiences. As we know, Estonia is quite famous when it comes to the digitalization. And we also know that the Sustainable Development Goals we cannot achieve without relying on digitalization. So, and you mentioned a deal. Yes, to promote the global cooperation on environmental data and data-driven solutions and the latest technologies, Estonia has initiated a deal, which is called the Data for Environmental Alliance, in March, almost 2 years ago, March 2022, when we celebrated the UNEP 50th anniversary here in Kenya. And just very briefly about DEAL, this is an initiative accelerating actions for reliable and accessible data and better data governance, which we know is the backbone of every forecasting effort and early warning system. So we also, with the deal, we also promote the reuse of digital solutions, not that we would have to develop the new ones over and over again. So we, in Estonia, we have developed numerous solutions for predicting and forecasting different environmental events. So we have prototypes based on, for example, on remote sensing and satellite data to monitor more efficiently the risk of possible floods. So there are many more examples, but I see, I'll stop here and maybe we can come back to that again.
I appreciate it. And look, you know, with a layperson's hat on, I would say, I must say, I'm surprised that anyone would still question the role of diplomacy and foreign policy in this space. International cooperation and collaboration is something that's been a theme throughout the day in every one of these panels. So yeah, thank you for that. I want to bring Stefania Ministrini in. Stefania is head of the Unit of International Affairs and Institutional Relations at the Italian Institute for Environmental Protection and Research. Stefania, just give us a sense first of how the Environment Agency in your country contributes to the development of these systems first.
Thank you very much for these questions. Good evening, everybody. And I'm delighted to be here. Thank you very much to the organizer for inviting me. Just a few words about this agency. As you can guess from a job title, I'm not a full expert about early warning systems, but I will be delighted to provide you with some key messages identified by my colleagues. So the Institute is indeed, as a double soul, is indeed the Italian Environment Protection Agency, and is also a research institution which operates in the space sector development at two levels. The first level has a European dimension. We work within the Copernicus program, which is the largest Earth observation program of the European Union. And ISPRA provides in situ data to allow integration with remote sensing monitoring capacity and to deliver operational services. So the so-called Copernicus core services. And amongst these services, there are emergency management, which relates to critical events such as earthquake, floods, wildfires, volcano eruptions, and you might have noticed that Italy faces all of them, actually. And then we also have a security service, which is about maritime surveillance and the surveillance of the EU external borders. So the second dimension where we work in this field is at national level. We provide operational services related to land, air, coastal, and ground motion. And what is interesting to know is that actually Italy has a capillary system due to an environmental systems, a national environmental protection systems at regional level. So we have environment protection agencies at regional level, and ISPRA coordinates them. Now, having said them, I would, if I may, I would just like to deliver a couple of key messages. Very short, yeah. So the first message is quite provocative, I would say. According to our experience, we should use and make the most of existing available data. We are plenty of data, full of data, but what we miss is the knowledge to use them adequately and correctly. And actually, these data, information, and services are very important for policymakers already. So we really need to boost knowledge transfer. So the second message, very quick, is related to open science and open data. In this field, we really need to increase collaboration and to overpass the reluctancies for data sharing. It is very important to make research research and scientists available and to let them actually apply open science practices. I will stop here.
Okay, no,
Yeah.
Excellent, and I'm glad you raised the data piece, the research piece, and I will come to IBM in just a second, but I do want to hear from some of the agencies, the space agencies, and the science on this as well. Now, what I'm going to do, I know that Tomasz from Slovenia, you have a brief presentation you want to do. If we could just run that and keep it pretty brief. Give it, and let me throw the opening question to you, which is, the challenges that Slovenia faces in terms of environmental early warning and how they're being addressed through your centre's work, which of course I should have said is the Slovenian Centre of Excellence for Space Science and Technology. Go ahead, Tomasz.
Yes, I actually brought some slides, but I don't see them being displayed yet. So can you announce, is it already, okay. Can you just go to next slide? I'm coming from Slovenian Center of Excellence for Space Sciences. We are actually Copernicus Relay Center, which has already been mentioned by our Italian colleague. But in addition to that, we are using microsatellites to do that. And we have recently developed a small satellite, ground station facilities and data processing, which was launched to space 2 years ago, or 3 years, a little bit more than 3 years ago. And the satellite is agile and can follow river basins, coastal areas, as well as actually you can track the flow of the rivers. This can be very advantageous for monitoring river basins from source to the sea. And as you can see from remote sensing, you get data about sediment flows, about what grows in the fields, what is going on in urban environments. And this is all related to all food, water, climate security, as well as transport. Now what we are doing with this data is we are trying to map them on real-life 3D configuration in order to develop a digital twin models that somehow combine water with soil moisture, with vegetation state, as well as climate conditions. And in this case, we can even monitor, like after some environmental states, how the rain actually ends up in river basins. The satellite is also quite agile, and we were able to respond to in Slovenia, we had 2 years ago major forest fires that produced a lot of damages and so on. So this was a quick response where our satellite with video and multispectral data helped. Now, the really detrimental thing that happens last year in Slovenia were floods that actually devastated the country, brought 10 billion euros damages, which were in urban environments. A lot of our industrial zones in Slovenia were unfortunately located in flood risky zones. And now actually we are even seeing the potentials how industry can participate in environmental solutions because they are vulnerable as well. And actually the damages that we've seen from space before and after are visible from actually damages to environment are visible from space. And what we were doing now was using Copernicus system to trace back the history of environment, how it was responding over the last couple of years. And here you have the how vegetation index changes over the last 2 years before the disaster, and we will be monitoring responses after. The same with soil moisture. But as it has been mentioned, there was a lot of interactions between land and water through landslides. And unfortunately, at the time of floods, we had just a week before severe storms that damaged a lot of our forests. A lot of trees ended up in water, together with agricultural products like this hail. And this was not our only hydrology. This actually affected our infrastructure. Now I can imagine that for early warning, this is a rather tricky area because it's rather unpredictable, even by numerical models, to take all these features into account. But still, we need to work on different scenarios. And in changing climate conditions, if we look in Slovenia, just over the last 60 years, the climate changed a lot. 60 years ago, we had a lot of snow in mountains, which melted in April usually. And you can see here that 60 years ago, the top throughput of water through the valley was in April. Well, now this effect is not that pronounced anymore. And the other thing, we are looking at this in the context of, in the last century, these are actually the events of flooding events. And you can see they are becoming more and more dense. So our future is not that looking very good. Our early warnings are not good messages. We need to position them into global changes, and we are doing these predictions, and we analyzed how this interaction worked also for Slovenia from global to local environment and so on. And we try to do, in Slovenia we now have a kind of multi-hazard control room where all the data are gathered, as a kind of technology demonstration. But when we get the data, the other thing is how do we disseminate it to society? And we actually do art, science, cultural events to inform people what happened and how their environment responds. And we even sometimes do our space technologies in a kind of art form to communicate this. And this is our part of our UN commitment for next 5 years. We are going further to develop this kind of techniques. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much indeed. Super. And thank you for the presentation. In fact, the pictures add a lot, I've got to say. So they really illustrate what we're dealing with here. Okay, let's hear from some of the space agencies. I want to start with Christian Feichtinger, Executive Director, International Astronautical Federation. With a broad question, Christian, and that is, with your hat on, what the opportunities and the challenges are for the space community. And you know, we'll hear from peers of yours in just a second as well. But what is the opportunity for you all now in helping governments? And are governments using you and leveraging your expertise nearly enough?
Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. I'm pleased to be here representing the International Astronautical Federation, which is an international federation bringing together more than 500 stakeholders and organizations active in space from 77 countries worldwide. So I'm very pleased to have the honor to speak on behalf of a global space community, actually. We are talking here about this triple crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, and pollution. And of course, this needs to be managed, but we cannot manage what we cannot measure, and there space comes in. I mean, space is the only tool that provides the opportunity for global monitoring. More than 50% of all the relevant climate variables can only be measured from space. Remote sensing for agriculture, ocean monitoring, monitoring of oil spills, of illegal fishery, all this is on a global level only possible with the use of satellite systems. And here we see in the last years really great opportunities and also a paradigm shift. While a few years ago, satellite operation of satellites and launching of satellites, development of satellites was the exclusive domain of government agencies, of space agencies. And it was mentioned already, the Copernicus system is really one of the top system providing really outstanding data free of charge for a huge community. But in the last years, the private sector has come up. More and more industries and private companies are now also seeing the potential in launching satellites, providing data services, and new business models have emerged from that. So there are great opportunities really in this area. One should also see the paradigm shift in terms of geographical reach of or activities of space. While a few years ago, space was a domain exclusively for some space nations, I would say. Today, practically all countries, including emerging countries, are using space assets, are developing their own space programs, or are using data that come from space. So they realize the value of space here. Just to mention also one very, very important example, for instance, is the International Disaster Charter. This is something that has been created by the European Space Agency and the French Space Agency in 2000 actually, and today brings together 17 space agencies from all over the world that are providing data services to any country of the world that can invoke this disaster charter whenever any disaster is coming up, and that has been used in the last years hundreds of times and really saved lives. So there are great opportunities, and I think we cannot overestimate really the role of space in the overall activities and action for environment protection. But there are also challenges, and we, for instance, at the International Astronautical Federation organized a conference, a global space conference on climate change last year in Oslo, was hosted by the Norwegian Space Agency, where we've brought together really the different stakeholders, and that is really important. The space community, together with the policy makers, politicians, general public, media, end users. And we've kind of had 3 days of very good discussions with very good outcomes, and we have summarized them in a summary report. We've distributed a few of them here. And just to mention 4 of the main findings or challenges which we have identified there, and that is communication, cooperation, transparency, and coordination. So if we talk about communication, the space community can do better in order to communicate what space can provide and how space can be an efficient toolbox to help climate action, specifically to the general public and also to politicians. And cooperation is obvious. I think we all need to kind of bring stakeholders together. Transparency, to be multidisciplinary and have an inclusive approach, and coordination. I think this is important because today we have such an outstanding wealth of data. Many people say we are drowning in data, but the end users and the local communities, sometimes they are starving for information, meaning making this data usable for the end user at the local community, really in the way they need to have it. So we need to think globally, we need to access regionally, and we need to act locally. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Good, and a great intro to the panelists from the various space agencies. And Charles, I want to start with you. Charles Mwangi, Director of Kenya's Space Agency. How are you communicating the benefits of this to the public, to your government?
Thanks for having us, and good afternoon. Again, a great opportunity for us, especially who are coming from developing countries, to show the value proposition of space. Like Christian indicated, and the presentation that was done from Slovenia, the value of space is easy to pick. But in developing countries, the challenge that we face is we are using resources that have competing interests. And the question that continues to be is how then do we allocate the resources or do a value proposition for space so that the people understand the benefit that they are coming from it is inherent in terms of the development. So how we do it at the agency is we have undertaken to do pilots, and one of the pilots is on the utilization of space on disaster management, and we did a pilot. The reason why that was important is because we wanted to address 3 components. The data component in terms of trying to understand what is available, and we have quite a number of data sources that are available, but most often that data is not sufficient. And we need other data sets from citizen science or any other data sets that we call the in situ data sets. Then do we have the people to be able to interpret that data, to be able to get insights from that data to make policy decisions? And then more importantly, do we have systems that then we can use to analyze these data so that we are able to give insights? And what we found within the ecosystem, when we say, and again, within the communities that we have in here, is that we understand the value of data. But when you go to the ground or when you finish this conversation, sometimes that information doesn't get to the person who is at the tail end where they're supposed to get. The farmer, the person who will essentially get inundated. And then once that information doesn't get there, then we lose out on the opportunity of building that value proposition. And what we've tried to do is now engage also the stakeholder, because one of the other challenges that we found is that we have quite a number of pilot projects that try to build value proposition. But those projects do not usually end up transitioning into programs, and then we lose out on the opportunity to build up on the value proposition. So I would say the major challenge for developing countries is to justify why we need to get into space and the value proposition, and then be able to put a case for space in developing countries.
Yeah, very good. Charles, thank you very much indeed for that. And look, before I come to Giuseppe and Charity, I do want to go to our remote guest on the back of what we just heard from Kenya. Laurent Sharan is head of UNSPBF out of Vienna. And Laurent, hopefully you can hear us okay. We've just heard that from Kenya. We've heard from Mozambique and Botswana as well. How does UNSPBF support countries, particularly developing countries, in utilizing this sort of information, this space-based information for disaster management?
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. Yep.
Yep,
Okay.
we can hear you fine. A little bit of a lag, but you're fine.
UNSPBF was set up by the UN General Assembly about 16 years ago to actually connect disaster management entities around the world with the space technologies community, let's say, or domain. And our mandate is basically to provide technical advisory services, to facilitate access to knowledge, to build capacity of countries. And by that I do not only mean Earth observation, or it's also about global navigation satellite systems, it's about satellite telecommunications. We very often travel to a country with a group of experts. We discuss with 8 to 9 ministries, involving always environment, of course, to understand the gaps, to understand how they use these technologies. Then we make recommendations to the government on how to improve on that, and how to, then we look into facilitating the capacity strengthening and other access to data and access to information related issues that they might be facing. So early warning obviously is one of the phases of the full disaster management cycle, and UNSPBF was set up to bring space technology benefits to that full disaster management cycle, including early warning. I think it's interesting to hear a lot of the points I wanted to make from the speakers before me. It is a lot about awareness. Very often we meet very good experts at the country level with very good knowledge of remote sensing, GIS. They just do not have knowledge of the various platforms, of the various data sources, of the fact that maybe the UN can also help them access the rather expensive commercial data in a much easier or cheaper way. So it's about awareness also, because we hear a lot what Christian mentioned, that there's a withdrawal in data, but the people are hungry for information. I would argue, based on the 55 plus countries we visited in the past 10, 15 years, that in fact, in many of those countries, in many of the developing countries, people need access to the data. They are not drowning in data, especially not when it comes to the commercial and expensive data. We need to do a lot more to facilitate their access to that data. They can work with that data. They can derive their own information. We do not need to give it to them from Geneva or New York or elsewhere. Mm-hmm. We just need to facilitate access to that data for them. So I think that remains the biggest challenge from my perspective, and how to coordinate all these different projects, initiatives, the donor resources, to make sure that we are not wasting resources in this domain. I can speak for hours about this, but I stop there, and of course happy to answer.
I just wanted a very quick follow-up. When you hear Kenya, Mozambique, Botswana, when you hear from the ministers in these regions, are you heartened by what you hear when they talk about their efforts and their plans in this space?
Yeah, I mean, and coincidentally, we visited all those countries as part of the UNSPBF advisory mission. Some maybe 10 years ago, others 5 years ago. So we have seen on the ground the needs, the challenges, and what I said before is applying to many, and including these countries that are having representatives present in this panel. So I definitely believe, and I heard about the issue of weather stations and access to real-time data. All those issues we find on the ground, we identify them, and I believe with smart investment, these can be addressed. These are just challenges that are requiring, how should I say, coordinated donor and UN support to make them happen. The technology is there, the data is there, yes, but it doesn't reach the right users and experts on the ground too easily. So I very much sympathize with that, and I think the points made are valid, and we are still not there. We have a lot to do.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you. Giuseppe Ottavianelli is head of the Applications Section, Climate Action Department, European Space Agency. Give us your perspective.
Right. So thank you for the invitation, and really pleased to be here today. Indeed, many of the other panelists have already introduced the great value of space. So I would like to start with a story. And I had the pleasure to sit next to, on my way to Nairobi, on the flight, next to a princess of Burundi, who's not also an ambassador for the country today. And during our conversation, we started discussing the conditions of our planet Earth and how space brings this vantage point from Earth observation, for telecommunication, for geopositioning, and so on. And she immediately nailed the big questions. How do you reach the final users? How do you reach the citizens with that information? How do you fully empower them? And this was already mentioned by many of the panelists as an issue. So, and it's extremely relevant for early warning systems. And at ESA, I believe we have three, let's say, points or three concepts that we work on. The first one is actionable information. So Earth observation is brought together with many other subjects in a multidisciplinary approach. And that increases the power of the data coming from space. It increases the power of that raw data and transforms it into actionable knowledge that can be used by these end users. The second point is the last mile effect. How do we indeed reach the final user with that actionable information? And how do we reach the full ownership of that actionable information? So there are 2 points here. First one is that no solution fits all. And the second one is that no single player, no single entity can do it all by itself. And so we need to be able to customize the solutions, customize the tools to these end users who are very heterogeneous in their needs. And so it's not a very trivial effort and a very trivial, let's say, activity to be achieved. So it needs constant investments, and it needs that sort of mechanisms of putting a seed and then making it scale through partnership, through the collaborative efforts of many entities, from a global perspective to a very local perspective in that chain of knowledge and in that chain of action. And we do that at ESA by facilitating a code development, a co-design approach, because the different type of early warning system, whether that can be from environmental crimes or pollution alerts or food security alerts or climate adaptation needs, have very different needs in terms of timescales or timeliness of the information being delivered, and maybe interfaces needs. Maybe sometimes we want just things as an alert on our mobile phone, or also the integration of proprietary data that people do not want to disclose in this multidisciplinary approach. The third point that I want to make is the iceberg effect, what I call the iceberg effect. I think there is a community in Earth observation, the meteorological community in Earth observation has achieved the abstraction of the assets. Today, we open our app, we click on something, we have no idea which satellites, which ground-based informations, which models, but we get the information that we want. And so this abstraction of the assets from the space community is something that we are constantly working on to make sure that we get the actionable information, doesn't matter where it's coming from, the right tailored, customized approach to the end users, for the end users, in the right way. So at ESA, we will continue these investments. We are continuing investments on the digital twin Earth on these information factories, on cutting-edge digital technology, on capacity development, empowerment, and also citizen science. And in this lovely dialogue with the ambassadors from Burundi, we share this final big important message that, again, nature has no boundaries. So sometimes actions are done at national scale, but are certainly going beyond the national boundaries. And whatever we do, wherever we do it, it will have global impact. So it's very important to have this, multi-scale approach in our analysis and analytics and action.
Okay, Giuseppe, thank you very much indeed. Charity, you've been very patient with us. Thank you. Charity, while you as Director IBM Research Africa, and of course, this is the technology piece and innovation, and I'd be interested to hear what role you see for innovation, what role innovation is playing, including innovation from IBM. Don't do a sales pitch, but in bridging this gap between capabilities and what is really, what have been identified as the urgent needs.
Thank you so much. Back to a point that Alexander made today about shifting from just managing disasters, current ones, to managing risks. And I think the fundamental thing there is really about data. How do we make sure we have the data that we need at the right spatial temporal resolution, that we are able to analyze it in a way that's meaningful, in a cost-efficient way, and then we're able to provide insights. So the way I see technology is really in three ways, and I'll give you one good example of what we are doing. One is the data sets that are required. I think we've had quite a number of examples, from satellite data to the kinds of other data that we overlay so that we can start to make impact assessments. Those are big data sets. And so just being able to manage these data sets in a way that allows us to run analytics that are meaningful is a critical part that technology is playing, can play, and also innovations in technology can help us to make this efficient. So many times when we talk about analyzing data, all of us think about how are we going to bring all of this data together so that we can be able to analyze data. Today, the improvements in methods of managing data allow us to actually create virtualized environments that allow us to keep data sets in places where they are, but be able to bring them together in a way that allows analysis without the added cost of physically moving them around. So that's one space where I think innovation is really helping us, particularly when we start to talk about space data, satellite data that's quite big data sets. The second example I want to share is, I know all of us heard about ChatGPT last year. That was all the hype. And what this actually means from a technology perspective was a fundamental shift in the way that we leverage artificial intelligence for analyzing our data sets. And I believe this is something that's really going to transform the way we create and use models for understanding climate and perhaps early observation systems. So the way, up until last year, the way we did artificial intelligence models was you needed to collect data, and you would really create very specific models for every use case that you were thinking about. Most of the methods were supervised, and so you needed to get a ton of data that was labeled that you would use to teach your artificial intelligence algorithm on how to make predictions, et cetera, et cetera. When we now look at the move that came with ChatGPT, the underlying technology, we call it foundation models. One, it allows us to start to leverage unsupervised methods of learning. So now you don't need all of these big data sets that needed to be labeled, which is extremely expensive and difficult, especially in developing countries. Second thing is now you could create one big model, we call it a generalized model, and then use it for many downstream activities, which before were just specific use cases. So the example I'll give from IBM is we worked together with NASA using their satellite data, and we created this geospatial foundation model. So think about 1 terabyte of data, 100 million parameters, created this pre-trained model, and all of a sudden you can now use it for things like your flood modeling. You can also use it for wildfire scar mapping. You can use it for land use, land cover, so many different use cases for this. What this allows is the ability for a company like ours or many others that may have the resources to create big models like this to do so, and we open sourced that, so it's available for people to use. And then specific organizations or countries can now come and bring in their smaller data sets that are labeled. They can use it to fine-tune a specific use case that they're interested in. And so this one lowers the barrier of entrance when it comes to using these big data sets. Two, it allows you to use smaller data labels, making it lower cost. And thirdly, you can now start to have a lower barrier in terms of the technology capacity requirement to be able to run and analyze these models. So I just wanted to give that example as one way that technology is advancing, and we can leverage it to start to gain some benefits.
All right, thank you very much indeed, Charity. Look, I'm very, very wary of the time. We have run over. There are a couple of interventions I want to take from the floor before we close. I'm going to go first to Jackson Lucea, the Maasai leader who is in our audience. Please keep it very brief, your intervention, if you can. And then I will go to this gentleman right here. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Very much. My name is Jackson Loseya from Masai Mara. I'm actually a guide and a owner of Tangulia Mara and Mara Siena. I'm born in the Masai Mara, so I have a few things that I would like to add from our panelists, is that there is a question that is very big here. We don't see the representation on the floor of our traditional people, and I think they're very crucial and very important to the adding of what is happening with our global warming. Then I just want to add a few things. Growing up as a young man, as an elder, in 1997, that was the first time we got hit very hard. When we had rain, that rain hard, and it was cold. We call it barafu rain. And as a pastoralist man, we lost up to 40 to 50% of our cows in one night due to rains that are very cold. And then 3 years after, we started realizing that we had severe droughts that killed up to 40 to 50%, sometimes up to pandemic of global warming. Now, we have one thing that we have to do in our culture, and that's why I say that we need to work together as people who are involved. Number one, we go back to our culture and have to pray and say, what have we done to God that this is happening to us? That's why our science need to come together in hands with the traditional people. Because we as traditional people, we have the fear. But the moment that you have the realization of fear, that's when you need to collaborate and work together with the scientists. And this is where the missing link is within the traditions and the science. The science have the data, the science have the know-how, but we do not have that work together as the people who are on the floor. Number two, when it happens that cattle are dying, you're not spared because you need protein and it comes from us. You need grains and it comes from our grocery that is there on the ground and we're working together. We need, as a solution, to work together with the people who have the know-how and the traditional people who are there on the ground digging. The final thing that I want to put it on is that up on the ground, we're busy. Because as a people, we need to survive, we need to dig, we need milk, we need honey, and so you. That if you are protected by your knowledge of how to do work in science, We need to feed you from the traditional place that we come from. And that is my final point. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Jackson. All points extremely well made. Thank you. And I want to end with this gentleman here. Can you just tell us who you are first and who you represent, and then keep your intervention very, very brief if you could, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alfa. Dear Excellencies, distinguished delegates and panel members, my name is Sundareshwara. I represent the United States of Kailasa, which is the first nation for Hindus revived by the sovereign of Kailasa, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, Bhagavan Sri Nityananda Paramashivam. And one of the important points that were discussed by all of you is the key importance of partnership. And towards this, the sovereign of Kailasa, the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, has been tirelessly working over the last 27 years through a worldwide movement in over 100 different countries towards the healthy planet, and taking a holistic approach through the Hindu tradition. And there have been several green initiatives towards this. And the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism has also envisioned care over cure. I guess that is where the early warning systems come into the place as well. And in our tradition, we look at planet Earth as Mother Earth. So the very approach that we take in the Hindu tradition, by very nature, is to protect it. And through the holistic approaches, we have seen very, very positive changes to the extent that we are able to mitigate any disasters just through the holistic approach. So I did hear from many of you distinguished panelists where the data sets and the space agencies as to how it is coming in, but I also feel another important component to this is the holistic approach. And some of the initiatives by Kailasa, by the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, for example, the Clean Air Initiative, which is basically an initiative by the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism, planting flora all over the spiritual embassies in over 100 countries around the world. And similar initiatives such as Go Zero Waste, Say No Plastic, Reuse Food in Agriculture, Go Vegetarian, Ishanya Project, and so on. So I also want to just pitch in over here is that Kailasa is actually working to bring back the planet Earth through its full glory, through the Healthy Planet Initiative, and looking to see that a holistic approach is also one of the key importance as being revived by the Supreme Pontiff of Hinduism. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, good. Two super interventions there. Thank you very much. Look, the first thing I want to do is apologize to my panel that I wasn't able to come back to you with further questions there. So there is so much to talk about, and I have so many questions for you, and maybe we can save it for dinner or for next time, but we will get you. So thank you for laying, for setting out the field so eloquently, all of you, to the ministers as well, and to the Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much to you too. We are going to head very quickly to the closing session now, so bear with us, but a round of applause for our panel, please. Thank you. So yeah, just bear with us. We're going to grab everyone else from the other tents, and we've got a short, sharp closing session for you coming up. And should we give them 3 minutes? I'm going to meet them at 8 o'clock. I have to. Yeah, they what do they know about stuff? Yeah, I mean, this is calm. It's fine. It'll be fine. No, I will meet them. Of course I will. But I do have to go and... incredible thing. I mean, this year, I've seen it every year, but this time, I mean, to have the first lady. So, Jane, where do you want Jane first? What do you want to do? Oh, it's back in the main room. Oh, we are starting in 5 minutes, but you're not coming on until your third. I can make you fourth. I'm going to put Jane third. But we probably will start. Nine seats. I'm gonna put Jane first. Ladies and gentlemen, the high-level closing session will start in 5 minutes. We're going to start in 5 minutes for the high-level closing. If you could take a seat, please, as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
Our moderators, please take your seats as the session is about to start. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, friends, thank you very much indeed for staying the course today. It has been a productive and a fascinating day. Plenty of insight from a large number of speakers. Let us conclude our deliberations with a lively session, very similar to the start, that brings it all together. To emphasize our commitment and to remind us of the imperative to move forward with urgency and determination, as I said earlier this morning, while leaving no one behind. To start with, it is my pleasure to introduce Zainab Bangura, Director General of the office in Nairobi.
Distinguished guests, excellencies, I know I'm supposed to say thank you, everybody. You have a wonderful day. As the Director General of the United Nations at Nairobi, most people call me the landlady, but today I call myself your host. This is my compound, so thank you very much for coming. I belatedly welcome you to the home of the only United Nations headquarters in Africa and the Global South, and the global headquarters of the United Nations Environment Program. I feel very privileged and honored to contribute to the vital discussion. I was listening there and talking to my brother and colleague, the Minister for Botswana, on the discussions taking place in the context of the UN Science Policy Business Forum on the environment. It was very interesting. As the meetings were taking place, we were comparing notes. I was a former Minister of Foreign Affairs and Minister of Health in my country before joining the UN here. I would like to specifically refer to tracking financial flows to nature, a subject critical to Africa, and particularly to Kenya, which I call home for the last 4 or more years. Kenya's leadership in environmental conservation, exemplified by the First Lady initiative to plant 500 million trees, reflects the profound importance of natural capital to our continent's economy and well-being. I was sharing a table this afternoon during the lunch with the First Lady, and we were talking to some of the guests, and people thought the decision by the president to plant 5 billion trees by 2030 was just a political statement. It's not. Because even in the compound, just take a look, we launched the reforestation. We've planted 2,000, Talia is here, my colleague, she's responsible. We planted 2,000 trees within the last 1 year. This compound was part of the Karura forest before it was given as a coffee plantation. Our commitment is to get it back to its original status, so that as you walk around, you can see all the animals and everything. And that's the intention. That's what Kenya is about, hoping that 30% of its land space can be forest by 2032. That's not a political statement. Each one of us is asked to make that commitment. And in Africa, where I come from, as you see me, you know I'm an African woman. In Africa, where natural capital is a cornerstone of livelihood and economic development, the gap in financial flows towards biodiversity conservation and ecosystem service needs urgent bridging. I describe myself as a village girl. I come from a village as I speak to you. We don't even have a school there. I love it. But I know things have changed. When I was in elementary school, we used to go to the streams to get water to drink and do our laundry. We didn't have tap water. But now those streams are drying up. It was nature. That's what we live on. So we know that the climate change has affected us. And that's why we're more concerned on the people who are causing that. I don't think it's a matter of compensation, because when I say that, it's feel that you allow them to pollute more because they believe they'll give you money. But how can we change? And as you have discussed, the World Bank and the OECD highlights this financial gap with an annual global need estimated between 300 to 400 billion. But current investments are only around 78 to 91 billion. And I think everybody is saying how unfair it is. The Secretary General, if you listen to him over the years, can tell you the challenges you have in terms of supporting the climate change funding. It's not there. And I think it's very unfair for Africa. So we do believe nature-based solutions need to become a cornerstone of cost-effective strategy for bridging this financial gap. Investment in this solution can yield substantial social, economic, and environmental benefits, with returns on investment potentially as high as $9 for every $1 invested, and according to the World Bank. I listened to where is it, the Maasai, the gentleman from Maasai Mara, I think he's left. You know, as you're all aware, last year, we're having rain now, but last year, Kenya suffered from the worst drought in 40 years of its history. That tells you something. Now you see the rain is coming. But it tells you how uncertain it is and the disaster it has caused. I mean, every day you watch television in Kenya last year, you see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cattle dying. It's really wiped out an entire economy in northern Kenya with the animals that we lost. Now to conclude, through the United Nations presence in Nairobi, the biggest footprint in Africa, the seat of environmental multilateralism, we are committed to promote sustainable development and inclusive growth, ensuring that environmental actions leave no one behind, particularly local communities and indigenous population whose livelihood depend directly on the health of the ecosystem. Let us continue to dialogue and work to advance our commitment to a healthy planet and healthy future. Every day I wake up, I sleep, I think, what kind of planet am I going to leave for my grandchildren? And that's what the question we should ask ourselves. Climate change problem doesn't belong to one country. It's all of us. And we all mostly committed the crime. Let's work together to find solution. Because, you know, I come from Sierra Leone as Minister of Health when COVID came, and in Kenya, you don't have disease. Climate change has no borders. It doesn't need passports. It doesn't have visas. It goes across continents. It goes across nations. So if we fail to make decisions, to support, to finance it, just remember it will not stop in Kenya. It's affecting Europe, it's affecting Asia, it's affecting America. Each one of us have a responsibility. Let's work together as a people to save our planet. Thank you.
Right, what I'm going to do, I'm going to invite our next speaker up to the podium to do a quick address from the podium. After that, we're going to settle back into the style we had this morning of those TED Talks. We've got 4 or 5 speakers who are going to grab a handheld mic, who are going to come up here and stand in the middle of the stage, and who are going to with energy and verve, close this session out for us. But before we hear from them, I would like to invite Dr. Lemogang Kwape, the Minister of Foreign Affairs from Botswana, to the stage to give his closing remarks. Minister, come on up.
Thank you very much, moderator. I won't keep you long. I had a speech well written up, but I tore it apart in the last 5 minutes. And everything she said, it was what I was going to say, so I'm going to leave. I want to preface what I'm going to say with a story about an old couple that lived by the creek. So every day they'll venture out, collect fruit and tubers, and if they so felt like they wanted to have meat, they will throw a net in the creek and catch fish. So along came a developer, and he said, "This is a lovely place. You can do so much. You can build hotels, you can build many things here." And then they asked, "And then what?" And then he said, "Well, then you live a very comfortable life." And they said, "Well, you've gone a long way. We are already living a comfortable life." So the moral of the story is, what we've done to our planet in the quest to live a comfortable life was a path of destruction. So we are working doubly hard to go back to where we were. It was lovely coming in late this afternoon, and it was raining. Particularly lovely for somebody who's coming from Botswana, a dry, arid country with very unpredictable weather. So I came late because I was dancing in the rain. So we should be very, very careful about what we're dealing with, especially the climate change part of it. For some of us, we bear the most brunt, but we pollute the least. But the undisputable truth is that no one will be spared. So there's a great need to collaborate. Collaborate not only in science, but in our indigenous knowledge systems, like the Maasai man was saying. Where I come from, early this year, my mother said, if you see a lot of fruit in a season, there's a high likelihood that there will be a drought. And I think we've thrown all that indigenous knowledge system out the window. So I want to agree with one of the panelists who said, we must think globally, we must coordinate regionally, and we must act locally. So with the skill set that Space SI was talking to, with the indigenous knowledge system, we can master, we can change the planet. Because if we do not change the planet will change us. And I want to end by quoting King Charles, when he said at COP28 in Dubai, the earth does not belong to us. We belong to the earth. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. Right, as I said, our 4 or 5 speakers now are going to grab a mic, come up and do their 3 minutes, and they are going to respond to these 2 questions. What are the building blocks to doing better, to putting the world on track to meet environmental goals? And if there is one thing that we need to either change or embrace to reach this goal, what would that be? We asked the question this morning. We heard some fascinating interventions. We've had a whole day of discussion. Let's see what they're saying now. First up is Jane Burston, Chief Executive Officer and founder at the Clean Air Fund. Jane, come on up.
Thank you. So in London, where I've come from, just landed this morning, a 9-year-old girl died from a severe asthma attack, and the coroner wrote air pollution as the cause of death on her death certificate. In Delhi, an international cricket match was postponed because the visibility was so bad because of air pollution that the cricketers couldn't see the ball, and some of them were even vomiting on the pitch. And in Warsaw, until recently, citizens were breathing the air that was equivalent of 60 packets of cigarettes every year. Now, politicians in these places are taking bold and ambitious action to reduce air pollution, and that action also tackles climate change. In London, we've seen the mayor implement the ultra-low emissions zone, which prevents the dirtiest vehicles from going into the city centre. And already that covers 10 million people, and it's reducing roadside nitrogen dioxide by 35% and carbon dioxide by 6%. The government of India have introduced many measures on air quality, including one to reduce crop stubble burning by mandating 5% of biomass co-firing in thermal power plants. So it also reduces the use of coal. And in Warsaw, as well as a new low emission zone, and despite the war in Ukraine, the regional government of Masovia has recently implemented a domestic coal burning ban, despite as well the fact that Poland is the second largest coal-producing country in the EU. So why are they all doing this? Because these measures are not without political risk. The reason that they're doing it is because air pollution is urgent in a way that, unlike climate change, most people can understand, and it affects us all right now. So if I was to pick one thing to tackle our environmental challenges, it would be to tackle climate change and air quality together. 3 quick reasons why. The first is that there's lots of opportunity to do so. We know that 2/3 of outdoor air pollution is from burning fossil fuels. So if the causes are the same, the solutions can also be the same. Renewable energy, clean public transport, more walking and cycling, greener industry. The second reason is that sometimes health-harming air pollutants are also very bad for the climate. One example is black carbon, or soot. It's warming in the atmosphere because it's black. When it lands on snow and ice, it accelerates the melting of that snow and ice because it's black and it's absorbing the heat. And it also is already changing monsoon patterns in India and West Africa. So it's increasing food insecurity and increasing the likelihood of flood risk. Despite that, black carbon and other superpollutants like ozone aren't currently included in our climate system, so they're not part of the Kyoto Protocol. Some countries are voluntarily putting them in their NDCs, about 17 countries so far, but it's not mandated. It's not even encouraged at the moment. And the third reason to work on air quality and climate change together is that the economic case is made much stronger when you do that. Action on air pollution pays for itself many times over because of the health benefits. It's not just the health systems savings, so not having to treat people who are sick. It's also the productivity benefit that you get when people can work because they're not off work sick or looking after sick children. And actually, Dalberg did a piece of research looking at the cost abatement curve for climate action. And they realized that when you factor in the health benefits and the cost savings because of the health benefits that aren't currently included in that, it doubles the amount of climate action which is net positive. So if I was to pick one thing, it's working on these two together. The 3 actions I would take are measure the health benefit of our current climate action and talk about it a lot to motivate more. Number 2, include superpollutants in our climate system, NDCs, and the Kyoto Protocol. And number 3, factor the health benefits into the economic case as well. Thank you.
Brilliant. Jane, thank you very much indeed. Next up is Stephen Kokoda, Executive Director of the International Copper Association. Come on up, Stephen.
So the minister from Botswana said he had to tear up his speech and rewrite something in 5 minutes. Well, Shireen just came up to me and said, I want you to say something. So I had to come up with something, and I've got a bit of jet lag fog.
You're good at that, Stephen.
Well, yeah, thank you. So, yeah, you know, the International Copper Association is one of the founding members of this forum. And it's so gratifying to see how the forum has grown over the years. I mean, this room was busting at the seams for a good part of the day. And I'm going to not do exactly what Shireen asked me to do. She wanted some reflections, but I was asked a question, a two-part question at lunch, and I'm going to not say who asked the questions, but I'm going to share the discussion that we had. And what she asked was, what does the business community get out of this? I mean, why do you come to the forum? Why do you contribute? What is the value that you receive from this? And there's no hesitation in my response. I said it provides an avenue, it's a vehicle for us to get our perspectives into these discussions, which we otherwise wouldn't have. And its ability for us to take perspectives, for me to take back to my industry and ensure that these perspectives go into the collective thinking of an industry. And then, what I said was, and then we have a voice with governments, and they could hear, what we need. What are the policies that we need? This, Shireen or UNEP refers to this policy cohesion. And that's so important to us, and I can't describe how valuable it is. So that's why we take part in the forum. I mean, look, it's always gratifying to see these three groups come together and the amazing amount of knowledge and experience that just flows throughout the course of the day. And the last point I'll make is the forum has grown. So there's obviously people that are new to the forum. Maybe this is your first one. Look, I encourage you to speak to Shireen, to speak to her team, and to talk about how you could collaborate more outside of this this one day of the forum. There's activities, collaboration going on throughout the course of the year, and those collaborations will ensure that the forum continues to be successful. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Stephen. Another regular on the forum scene is Professor Maria Ivanova, Director, School of Public Policy and Urban Affairs at Northeastern University. Great to see you here, Maria.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be back, because it has been going on for a few years. This forum is amazing. It brings together science, policy, business, but it's missing something. So we're here today to talk about problems that we know. We know because science has shown the problems. We're here today because we even know the solutions, policy, or engineering, or business solutions. What we do not have enough is inspiration, and what we have not done yet is to be mobilized. So I'm here today to talk about one thing, one actionable big idea, and that is to create an art and academia alliance. You're seeing the art images already, and that's what's been missing from this forum. Yes, we've had science, we've had policy, we've had business. We have not had the art and inspiration. Why art? Art appeals to us in a different way. It tickles our imagination. It makes us think different. It also points to social issues that are critical. Think of Frida Kahlo, Mexican artist from the 1930s, of her portraits, of her depictions of the difference between the North and the South, between the US and Mexico, of her vehement struggle for women's rights, indigenous rights, workers' rights. Then think of artist Benjamin von Wong, whose 30-foot sculpture of a faucet spewing plastic waste was right there on the green in front of UNEP during UNEA 5. That shocked us. That art shocked us. It motivated us to do something else. We've seen quite a bit of art that shows the problem. What I think we have not seen enough is art that shows a vision of a different world. What is that? What is that bridge between heart and mind? The bridge between data and dreams. Enter innocent Nkurunziza, who's right here, right now. An artist from Rwanda whose work exemplifies harmony with nature. Innocent paints on tree bark. So imagine a canvas. It's not a normal canvas. It's a breathing canvas. It's a living canvas made of renewable tree bark. Innocent's art of spirals, of rivers, exemplifies something that we aspire to have, to be. And so through an art and academia alliance, we can connect heart and mind. A global alliance where we can connect north and south, east and west, where we connect humans and nature. We can do that. And only through bringing in that inspiration into our analytical world can we create what today was called Olga's world. Olga spoke in the morning as part of the children and youth message to this forum. And I'm humbled and honored because Olga's my student. She's my PhD student. And today, the question was, how old will you be in 2050? She'll be 54. Younger than a lot of people here in this audience right now. So what will that world be? This is the world of intellectual genealogy, of spiritual genealogy. What we create today, we pass on. We pass on through tradition, not only through science, not only through knowledge, but also through art and through tradition. And so I conclude by saying, let us be good ancestors and better neighbors. Thank you.
Maria, thank you very much indeed. Mina Guli is founder and CEO of Thirst Foundation and is our next speaker. Come on up, Mina.
Thank you, Axel. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a problem, a water crisis. It's urgent and it's threatening everything we've been talking about here today. Climate change, biodiversity, our communities, societies and our economies, our fields and our factories. If we don't get water right, everything falls apart. I know because I've seen it. Over the last few years, I have run thousands of kilometers in some of the harshest places on the planet. Deserts like the Atacama in Antarctica and rivers like the Colorado, the Nile and the Amazon. And glaciers in Europe and in Asia that are melting faster than you can imagine. Along the way, I've met thousands of people who've shared their water stories. Women and girls in India risking their lives each day to fetch water for their families. Transport operators on the Rhine watching as the river dropped to 500-year lows, drying not only the water, but their businesses. Indigenous communities in the Amazon living amongst the charred remains of old-growth forest and whose once floating homes are now lying on the sand. And young farmers in South Africa who said to me, Mina, what hope do we have? To pray for rain or to leave our farms? Their message is clear. We need to act and we need to do it now. As one of the local guides said to me as we were climbing up to the glaciers in Tajikistan, Mina, please tell these people directly, the time for soft language is over. We need real action and we need it now. He's not alone. Over the last few years, we have grown the biggest global grassroots movement on water in history. Thousands and thousands of people in over 200 countries and territories stepping up for change, sharing their stories and helping to put water into the media and onto the global agenda. Together, they are demanding action. And together, today, we have an opportunity to respond. To ask ourselves, what is the one thing that we can do that will unlock such catalytic change that it will fundamentally impact the future of this planet and it will improve the lives of billions of people across the globe? Elizabeth Marema said to us this morning in the opening session, without protecting nature, businesses will collapse. But without protecting water, nature will collapse. And rivers are the front line of both water and nature. So the answer is simple. The one thing that we must do is to protect, restore, and rebuild the resilience of our rivers. Rivers are the arteries of our planet. They bring us water to drink, to generate power, and to cultivate food. They flow through our communities and our cities and form the backbone of our economies and our supply chains. For thousands of years, rivers have been everything to us, and yet we've treated them as if they're nothing. We've drained them, dammed them, diverted and polluted them with rampant disregard for the long-term costs. And those are costs and a price we can no longer afford to pay. Urgently, scaling up efforts to restore and protect and sustainably manage our rivers lies at the core of everything we are talking about and addressing this week. Water, food security, peace and stability, and global efforts to tackle climate and nature crises and to drive sustainable development. The fate of rivers and the fate of humanity are inextricably linked. And when they die, so do we. I know because I've seen it, and I'm not prepared to stand by and let it continue. And so, right now, I'm preparing to run tens of thousands of kilometres down some of the world's great rivers over the 2 years leading up to the next UN Summit on Water. To be honest, it will be one of the hardest things I will ever do. And it makes the 200 marathons I ran last year look like a warm-up. But big goals need us to be prepared to do hard things, whether it's running ridiculous numbers of marathons on the front lines of the water crisis or committing here today to protect and restore our rivers. So here is my challenge to all of you in this room. Have the courage not to look at these global crises and see failure, but to look at them and to see opportunity. An opportunity to reach across traditional boundaries, to turn away from failing past practices and vested interests, and an opportunity to build on the resources and the momentum growing around the world, to do the one thing that will impact the lives of all of us everywhere, to save our rivers. We share our fate. We flow together. Now, let's act together. This is our moment. Let's make it count. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Mina. Next up is Dr. Mohammed Abdel Raouf, co-chair of the UNEP major groups and stakeholders representing science and technology. Mohammed, come on up.
Thank you, and also I'd like to thank the UN Science Policy Forum. It's very lively to be here again. I thank all the team for all the efforts. It's really amazing, and it's really very inspiring. I know we are running out of time. I will be very brief. Frankly, the question is very difficult. So one thing, I can mention hundreds of things, but anyway. So because the system, like I said, is in a deep trouble. So we have a problem in food system, climate system, water system, energy system, managerial system, social system. So any system, if you can take any system, it will be difficult to say one thing, but there's also, like the previous speaker, all these problems give us an opportunities. And this is an opportunity for the companies and for the business also, because this is the future. The future belongs to everything that's environment friendly, anything that relies on electrification and artificial intelligence, carbon markets, early warning system, all these what we have mentioned, but it's important to bring the one thing that is missing, in my opinion. In my hat, as a major group co-chair at UNEP, I think the major groups and civil society should be in every table. They bring knowledge, they bring research, they bring advocacy, they do monitoring on the ground, they do watchdog job for companies, for governments, for everyone. I have seen the wrong things happening in many places, like our dear friend, the minister from Botswana, mentioned one example. I have a similar example where they invited big companies to construct new buildings in one of the remote villages, and the people were very unhappy because the whole system is wrong. They didn't consult with the local people. They need to sit before with the local people, bring the right people to the table, and they build the systems that cannot accommodate the local conditions, ventilation, lighting, and many other things, social conditions, social culture. So if you don't, as a result, you spend a lot of billions in the wrong way. So if you bring the right people to the right table, including major groups, which are very important, they bring cultural, faith-based organization, like mentioned by our colleagues from Hindu. Yes, definitely, faith-based organization plays an important role, and all the religions encourage of integral approach, and the aim is to improve the quality of life, at least we can leave the earth with the same condition, not deteriorated. But we are deteriorating and we are banishing the future generation. Just one last example, I have this last example as a head of a researcher, I work in a Gulf research at an institute. So I was called by one ministry, because the ministry is a governmental companies who are not achieving profits, but the indicators are good. So all the indicators are good, but the situation is deteriorating. So, and this is the second message I want to say. So the second thing, or the second message, is that we need a new innovative indicators that can take into consideration social, environmental, economic consideration, because the current system is wrong. We have the wrong indicator. If we have the wrong indicator, we have the wrong results. And this is the example I wanted to mention very briefly. So we went to this sector and we have studying everything. Everything is fine according to the indicator. But finally, we found that they have the wrong indicator from the beginning. They made the management, and these corrupt big companies, they bought a wrong indicator so they can be easy to achieve, but as an overall result, it's deteriorating, they're achieving losses. So I think the second message, in short, is that we need to have internalizing the externalities, corporate social responsibilities, a new systematic change with a new indicator to measure the progress. And this is my second message. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. All right, we've got two speakers left. Next up is Martin Brocklehurst, Chair of the Citizen Science Global Partnership. Martin, the floor is yours. Grab one of those.
Thank you. Let me take a few comments from this morning. What needs to change? Citizens need to be an integral part of delivery of multilateral environmental agreements. Get down on delivery. That's what citizens want. We cannot manage what we cannot measure. Citizen science delivers that for you. Open science and open data. We pioneered this with UNESCO. Please don't neglect communication with citizens. That's at the heart of citizen science. And what I love from this morning, 69% of the public will contribute 1% of their income to tackle climate change. Well, let me tell you a citizen science story. It's possible for people to fund solar photovoltaics and put them on public buildings, charge for electricity that's 10% below the market rate, get a return on their investment that is better than the bank, and still make a profit for the next one. People look at me when I tell that story and say it can't be true. It is true. It's happening. And when people realize you can do that, they realize they can divert profit back from fossil fuel companies into their own communities to help make the climate change happen. Embrace the collective will, one speaker spoke this morning, into a global movement. Well, that is what is happening with citizen science at a phenomenal pace. Partnership is the new strategy. That is citizen science. It's only 2013 when in the European Union you could not find the word citizen science in almost any document. Now it's at the heart of a lot of what happens in the European Union. The first piece of legislation is in place using citizen science data. And we are at the heart now of much of the research work that is going on. And we have had two people here who saw that vision in 2014. One who's going to speak in a minute, Janusz Potocznik, and the other was Jackie McGlade. Because what they saw is that you can get 10 to 15% of the European population to take part in citizen science. That's some 75 million people. At the global level, Shireen Zorba of UN Science Policy Business Forum encouraged us to form the Citizen Science Global Partnership, which is now a year old, to promote a global approach to citizen science. The potential for the same percentage is 1 billion people that could get involved in citizen science. For the first time ever in our history, we have technology that enables us to engage huge numbers of people on the planet using the mobile phone. I mean, how many people here have a mobile phone? Put your hand up. Has anybody not got a mobile phone? There are more mobile phones sold in Africa than there are sold in America. There are more phones sold here than are sold in Europe. So the trick is to link people to the implementation of the MEAs. We can mobilize millions of people if member states are given the tools to work with the Global and Regional Citizen Science Association and the skills that are required to make citizen science effective. We are experiencing a social revolution in the way that scientific work is undertaken and how it can provide real-time evidence back to those who take part in the citizen science programs. The people that know what's going on the ground are the indigenous peoples, the farmers, the fishers, the disadvantaged people. In our cities, all social levels of strata can be involved. We can reach the remotest regions and into the heart of a city. Give people real-time data in return and they will change their behaviors to mitigate health risks from air pollution, to increase their economic wealth. And if they can do that, they will work with you to make change happen. Put them at the heart of what we're doing. The future is not business as usual. It requires new skills, new funding structures, and a willingness to take risks with the data that we produce so that it is fit for purpose. Never before in our history have we had this technology and the artificial intelligence systems to manipulate large volumes of citizen data. We will need the UN to gear up to support the regions, the member states, and the cities to learn from those who do the best, to scale up the best research programs, and we need to be agile and move at speed. To make this happen, we need a framework to coalesce around, and that can only come from the UN, working with the global citizen science community. And we are going to talk tomorrow morning at 9:30 in the green room about a need for a charter for citizen science. So my one big idea. So to close out, you may be skeptical, but let me tell you that from China to the Amazon basin, from the city of London to the heart of Nairobi, we have proven programs that engage from youth to the retired person we can engage millions of people. This is not citizen science for the global north, nor for the educated elite. This is citizen science for the human masses that must be part of our solution if we're going to make our global agreements work. So please join us and support the development of citizen science and the Citizen Science Charter. Help us to make this, the next decade, the decade of citizen science. Let us say, when we look back, that we were at the precipice, but we hung on. We found a new way for the people on this precious earth to find a way back. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Martin. And our final speaker, as Martin said, is Janusz Potocznik, co-chair of the International Resource Panel. Janusz, come on up. You want to stand at the podium?
Thanks. No problem. Oh, yeah. Dear most resilient friends, inspiring and long day. Before our lunch, we have heard from Hans about the conclusions from IRP's flagship Global Resource Outlook and the future it envisages. A future where we put people and our planet above profit, because in that way we will all profit most. A future where we systematically change our approach and target our resource use to delivering human needs and decent life for all. To make this future a reality, on a conceptual base, 4 major changes are necessary. First, we need to move from humans in function of economic success and development to an economy in function of delivering human needs. Instead of following the output maximization of the production sector measured by GDP, we should optimize our human needs and maximize our well-being. We must set the order right. Second, we need to move from an economy considering humans as external and superior to nature to an economy acknowledging that we are embedded with nature. This is one of the core problems of our contemporary economic theory we are still teaching in our schools. Destroying nature is destroying ourselves. Third, we need to move from an extraction-based production to a creation-based production. We should stop stimulating extraction-based economic success and reward responsible, innovative, creative ways of meeting human needs. And finally, we need to move from an egoistic, short-term based interest governance structures and logic to cooperation, sharing, including sharing sovereignty, like we are already doing it, for example, in climate talks. Safer and more equal world is a precondition if we want people to be concerned about environmental challenges, and we must improve our collective resilience. I do hear that some extracting countries in negotiating rooms are worried about resource optimization logic present in GROW24. Dear friends, GROW24 is in the first place a guide to a more equal world. It calls high-income countries to create a space for those in need to still meet basic human needs in low and some middle-income countries. To be clear, even if we take all necessary steps in optimizing energy and future material needs, the needs for materials will increase due to many reasons. Due to an absolute necessity emerging from meeting basic human needs by those still in need, due to already agreed energy transition requirements, and also due to population growth. But if we do not mitigate their growth due to the increasing environmental pressures, due to already existing ecological overshoot, material use will soon get the same public and policy attention as fossil fuels have already today. And this should not be in the interest of any country, be it using or extraction resources. I also hear that some have reservations concerning the circular economy resolution. Let me be clear again. Circular bioeconomy is just common sense. It is the oldest concept on the planet Earth. All nature is based on principles of circular economy. Nothing is lost. Everything has its purpose. We humans, as part of nature, should just abide by the same principles. Unfortunately, what seems logical in theory isn't so clear in practice. Circular bioeconomy is an efficient instrument for delivering decoupling that IRP is championing in practice. But it is also a part of the bigger picture of economic, societal, and cultural transformation needed to deliver sustainable development goals. We simply cannot afford. I have enlarged the screen so that I can barely read. We cannot afford two UNEA at the same time. One talking about necessity to change, and the other negotiating like they would not really hear us. Governments should defend public interest and keep future for all generations following us alive. They have no right to let us down. To conclude, there is no magic stick. We need vision keepers from science to remind and empower us. But we also need forward-looking governments led by public interest, creating level playing field, leading to a sustainable and fair future. And we also need innovative business operators to turn all those visions and rules into reality. Any transformation, it's a major business opportunity for those who are innovative, those who dare, and those who understand the essence of the challenge ahead of us. In politics, where I have spent most of my time, it is difficult to operate in real time. One could just be behind or ahead. More or less, one either defends the past or designs the future. At UNEA, we must be ahead of time designing our sustainable future. And in politics, there will always be urgent and important matters to solve. While focusing, by definition, will be more on urgent matters, solutions must also be consistent with those which are important to avoid that they would actually not become urgent. In one sentence, the future will be green or there will be no future. And yes, stay optimists because optimists live longer and better. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much indeed, Janusz. And that rounds out the high-level closing. Look, you've heard enough from me today, so I'm going to keep this very, very brief. Besides, who really wants to follow a set of speakers like that? That was inspirational, to say the least. So thank you very much to all of those speakers. It's been yes, it's been a very long day, but it's been a fantastic day, a really memorable day. And on behalf of the UN Science Policy Business Forum, and on behalf of Shireen Zorba, I want to thank this amazing community. I want to thank this amazing community, which, as we've heard over and over again today, grows and grows and will continue to grow. This one day and your dedication will help inform the United Nations Environment Assembly, and that is important. So thank you to all of you for your incredible resilience. Our work, the work of the forum, my work as a journalist, everyone's work that you've heard from today will continue, and we will meet again either here in Nairobi or in London or in New York or wherever Shireen decides to convene us. So thank you very much indeed to all of you. I have one final message, and this is a refreshing one for you because it does involve drinks and alcohol. Invitation for a networking session, the UNEA 6 reception. The President cordially invites all of you, the Science Policy Business Forum, to the Presidency's reception at the Recreational Centre. Do feel free to network and interact with one another if you've got the energy. And you'll be guided there by the Science Policy Business Forum team. Thank you very much. It's been great to see you all.